I also see it as like a big responsibility too. Like I'm hopefully going to have this, fairly high net worth, and it's a huge responsibility. Like, how are you going to use that money to change the world? Just having a bunch of money to have money doesn't really do anything for anyone else. So how am I effectively going to use that, later on as I get older to hopefully affect, positive change somewhere along the way? So I kind of view it as a big responsibility as well.
You're listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast, where you'll hear the stories and interviews of everyday millionaires. We'll unveil their decisions, their strategies, and their current portfolio allocation. Now to your hosts, Clark Sheffield and Jace Mattinson.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Millionaires Unveiled podcast. This is episode number 146. Jace, what's going on? How are you?
Not a lot. Doing pretty well. How you doing?
Good. We just had 2 interviews tonight. Interviewed one guy who's well on his way to becoming a millionaire. He's at about $650,000. He's a college professor. And then another guy who is mostly in real estate, kind of got not a later start, right? But late 30s or mid 30s, started investing in real estate, mostly self-storage. So a couple interesting interviews coming up here.
Yeah, no, we've got a lot of great ones in the pipeline. And like I mentioned last week, super excited for so many of our guests that we have coming up. It's truly remarkable, those that have reached out to us, and we really appreciate it. This show would not happen without y'all, so thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, last week I thought we had a great interview. We had John. He has a net worth of over 5.4 million. So one of our higher millionaires. He recently wrote a book, or a couple of years ago, I think, right now, called The Wealthy Gardener. So a really interesting interview with him. He talked about struggling to buy pizza in his 20s. And at age 30, he had, and I've had a moment, I guess, if you want to call it that, and figured out what he wanted to do and became a little bit more focused. So really interesting interview last week with John. That's episode 145. Today's guest is interesting. We have Phillip. He's an Air Force pilot. He's been in the Air Force for 16 years. He has 4 children and a current net worth of 2.4. So stay tuned with us for that. Jace, one thing we were talking about earlier, you came across it initially, right? An interview or a podcast with a guy that talked about experiences and the value of experiences and paying more, at least initially, right? Or early on in your life to have those experiences, that some of those are things you can't replace.
Yeah, no, it's been an interesting topic. The gentleman who I've listened to, and I guess is kind of on this train, I guess, if you will, somewhat of a movement, I guess, if you want to call it. His name's Bill Perkins. And he's got a remarkable story, but one of the things he's pitching or is an advocate for is just taking experiences and spending as it comes in your life instead of waiting, and spending your money so much later in life, if you will. And so, he goes into, I've heard him on a couple of different interviews. He's got a book out, and he goes into this process of, let's just say, for example, in your 20s and you're single and you have opportunities to go travel and do certain things and you don't do them. Well, that ship sails. You get into your 30s and you get married, you can never go travel as a single person, and you forget those memories. And he gets into this long description about how, so much of our focus financially is targeted towards growing our net worth and compounded interest. And he spends all this time talking about the compounded growth or compounded interest, if you will, of these experiences that we have. And that, if you do something in your teens or your 20s, let's just say you're in your 30s or 40s, you can draw back on that experience and it continues to bear fruit, if you will. And so it's just been something that I've been thinking about lately, especially talking to so many of our millionaires, and we have this focus on building wealth and obtaining financial independence and freedom. And it just caused me to take a step back a little bit. It's always something that I think you and I talk about, trying to find that balance of what makes sense, how much to save versus how much to live in the moment now. Because, you don't want to get to the point where you're 60 and say, man, I wish I would have done that in my 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s or whatever.
Yeah, and the one piece I liked is he said, look, some of these experiences are meant to have when you're 25. Right? I mean, there's things that I'm interested in right now that I'm not going to be interested in 10 years, or there's things that I was interested in 15, 20 years ago that I'm not interested in now. Yeah. So this mindset of, hey, I'll just do it later, I'm going to save money and then I'll do it. He says, look, a lot of that stuff you might not ever end up doing. Right? I mean, okay, if you're pushing off a house sale, that's different, right? But if it's skydiving or if it's going on a backpacking trip through Europe, I'm just picking out examples, right? I mean, you start having kids, life gets busier. Those are things you may not do. And so I thought that was a good point of his in saying, look, don't push off all experiences because some of those you won't do again.
Oh, yeah, totally. I think you and I have had a few of those in our lifetime. I think back to a trip I took with some buddies in college, and we just went on a whim, decided to go on a road trip, wanted to do it for less than $100. And, the only way to make it all work and do some of the things we really wanted to do was sleep in the car 2 of the nights. And, we're college, so we're like broke, whatever. We slept in the car. I think we were there for 4 nights, 2 of the nights we slept in the car. And one of my buddies gets up and he's just pouring Dr. Pepper down his back like 2 in the morning. And, he's like, we're like, dude, what are you doing? It's like so hot out. He's like, I just got to cool down. And the only thing we had in the car that was cold was Dr. Pepper. And the morning he wakes up, he totally forgot about it. He had no idea what went on. He's like, why am I so sticky? And we're like, dude, remember pouring Dr. Pepper down your back? And I just thinking a laugh. I mean, we paid nothing, right? We slept in the car. It's terrible, right? We didn't get any sleep. But to this day, the 3 of us discuss this trip all the time. And we have so many laughing, funny memories about it.
Yeah, so it's a pretty interesting thing. Experiences, right? And that's what we've heard from our millionaires. Our experience is worth the money. So pretty interesting. Just take a look again. That's Bill Perkins. If you Google that, I think it'll probably just pop up. So we appreciate everybody who entered the giveaway last week. Thank you. We had tons of entries, the most we've ever had. So the 3 winners have been notified, and we'll get those books out this week. There's a bunch of new giveaways coming up. So whenever we interview somebody, if they've written a book, we try to get one to have a giveaway. So there'll be some in the near future. So hang with us. If you're interested in sponsoring the show, feel free to send us an email. Our email is millionairesunveiled@gmail.com. So thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Hope everybody is staying safe and healthy. And without any further delay, let's get into today's episode with Phillip.
Phillip, do you want to just give us a little bit about your background and what you're up to now?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm an Air Force pilot. I've been in the Air Force for the last 16 years, bounced all around the country and overseas doing that. I've had a great time. Being a pilot in the Air Force has been a lot of fun. Been deployed a lot as well, so been able to see a whole bunch of the world. Along the way, I met my wife while we both were at the academy together, Air Force Academy. And we both graduated from there, became pilots together, both actually flying the same airframe. So we got to see the world and do a lot of our stuff together. So it's been a great ride. We have 4 children. We started having kids after our first assignment. We actually adopted our first daughter, found out that we were pregnant as soon as we got home with her. So our 2 daughters are about 8 months apart. They're both 10 and 9 now. And then we have 2 sons that are 7 and 5. After we had our last son, my wife was still in the Air Force, and we decided it was getting a little crazy having 4 kids and us both having the threat of possibly deploying and running around the world still. So she was able to get out of the Air Force, spent 3 years at home with our youngest until he was grown. Then she actually started flying again. She just missed flying. She thought she was never going to go back to it, but she ended up missing it. Went back in. So she currently flies for a major airline as well. Along the way, we piled up rental homes, personal homes that we rented out. Just continued to save aggressively, or invest, I guess, aggressively all along the way. Having dual income was really helpful. We basically lived on one income, invested the other one. By doing that, we've been able to amass over 2 million. We're close to 2.5 million right now. And net worth just from really aggressively investing early on and piling up money along the way, and also trying to have a little bit of a life with the kids.
That's awesome. So let's get into that. So 2.4 million, how is that kind of broken up?
All right, I'll give you the rundown. We got a little bit. There's a lot of different buckets, but it's all primarily equities. I don't have any bonds. Since we have kind of a long time frame and horizon, I've always kind of been in equity, and most of that is mutual funds, although we do have a little stock. So in our just liquid savings checkings, we've got about 40 grand that we just keep kind of as an emergency fund. I've got a Robinhood stock account that has 25K. Kind of a different thing. I bought season tickets for the Los Angeles Chargers. We live in the LA area, and the new stadium just went up. It's going to be up this year. So I bought $100,000 worth of seat license. That's 2 seats that we own for the next 50 years. So I can sell those seats if I don't go to the game. They're VIP seats. They're pretty awesome. They're on the 47-yard line. I can sell those tickets. So I kind of use it as an investment / personal thing if we want to go to some games also. So there's $100,000.
How much does that cost? Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no problem. The seat licenses were $50,000 a seat, and that's just to secure the seats. And then the tickets are about $350 per game. You got to pay that on top.
And can you flip like per game? What can you sell it for? Do you think?
It depends how the Chargers do a little bit. Hopefully, we get some more fans. It's been a little touchy as they started to move to Los Angeles. But looking at other seasons or other stadiums that have like these prime premium seats, if you look at the Cowboys or some of the bigger stadiums, those seats will go for between $500 and $1,000 for the premium VIP seats. These include parking, food, drinks. They're all inclusive kind of seats with VIP entrances. So. It's a little bit of a kind of a gambly thing. Like I may end up just going to every game and sitting on all the seats, but I'm a huge sports fan. So like if that's the worst thing that happens, that's fine. If I can flip them for a profit, that's cool too. So I kind of put it as a little bit of a win-win. Me and my wife both went in. Initially, I was like, oh, this will be a good investment. She's like, no one may want these seats. I was like, well, then I'll just become a huge football fan and go to every game. So I kind of both sides of the point on that one.
So if they move to LA, do you keep that right?
Yeah, they already moved to LA. So
I'm sorry. Okay.
2 years. Yeah, I know. If you're not, everyone still calls them the San Diego Chargers. So, but the fear is that they move away, right? So I asked that when we bought the ticket. I was like, hey, if they move to, they become the London Chargers in a couple of years, what happens? And I basically get to keep the seats in whatever stadium they move to. And there is a third party market where I can sell that license on like a third party site or a third party market to sell the license to those seats. So I'll own them if they end up moving, or I can hopefully sell them if I need to. Just kind of interesting little side venture there on that one.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I bought into a syndicate. I was listening to syndicate stuff, and so I have a $50,000 share in a 400-door home outside of Atlanta. That's a 3-year hold on that. So I'll have that, see if that matures in 3 years, and I get a little bit of dividends out of that. We've got a 529 for the kids. We've got 15K in that. The reason that's kind of low right now is we actually, with us both being in the military, we have the 9/11 GI Bill that we can transfer to our kids. So we both transferred our post 9/11 GI Bills to our kids. So 2 kids are going to go to college on that. So we only have 2 colleges to pay for. And with us both being academy grads, if we can trick one of them to go into the academy, that's another free education. So I'm banking on maybe only paying for 1 college. So we'll continue to add to that 529 and see how things work. There's also a chance if we'll be able to just cash flow, both the other kids' college, since they're only 5 and 7. We got some time to go too. So I don't have a whole bunch in the 529. And another brokerage account that just has some stocks. This is mostly my Apple stock. I got about 75 grand in a brokerage account that has probably 50 to 60 grand of Apple that I bought way back when and just held on to it. I've sold a little bit here and there when we did some remodeling and stuff, just to have a little bit less and overall just single stock. My IRA, which is again mostly mutual funds. I'm a big S&P guy, index fund investor. So that's 75% S&P and like a 25% growth mutual fund. That's about $205,000. We're saving up for a down payment on our eventual next home. I've got about 50 grand, and that's mostly an S&P fund there. My wife's IRA, 170 grand. Again, that's mostly an S&P and a little bit of growth. She just started at her company, so she's got a 401k that has $18,000 in it. The airlines are pretty awesome with their retirement. They give an automatic 16% contribution of your paycheck for the month goes into your 401k. So she doesn't put anything in, and they just take 16% of her gross pay for the month and dump it into a 401k. So we haven't touched that. And that's just grown pretty much organically over the last couple of years. My TSP, so military as a TSP, that's about 53 grand. And again, that's mostly in their C fund, which is their S&P MIR. And then our big chunk of it is in our mutual fund, like nest egg that we started with USA, which is where we started banking and investing with being in the military. And that has about $850,000 in it. And that's we started that fund. Just like when we started in the military, I was like, well, I don't want to invest in retirement. I don't want to wait 50 or 59, 60 to get that money. Let's just start investing in something we have access to if we ever need it. So that's been our fund that I've just dumped money in, thousands of dollars a month as we went along the way. And that's grown to, like I said, it's at 850, close to 850 now. And so that's kind of our nest egg that we have most of the money in, and we have access to it because it's not locked up in a retirement. So if I want to tap into that to do a down payment or do any other investing, we kind of have it accessible. But it's grown so much that I have a lot of taxes. So I haven't been tapped into it too much because I don't want to pay the taxes on it. And then we have 3 vehicles worth about 56 grand each. We don't have a bunch of cars, although we did buy a pretty sweet minivan recently. The electric Pacifica was about almost 48 grand. I think we bought that. But there's a bunch of tax rebates and incentives on that as well. So that all totals up to about 1.6 and kind of liquid cash investments we have. And then we have a bunch of rentals, 3 of which are paid for. Totally, those are worth 58, 60, and 70. And then our personal residence and some other rentals that are between 65 and 195,000, and those are worth about 1.7 million. And I have about $1 million in mortgages on all those and our personal residence. So all that totaled up about 2.4.
Wow, that's awesome. And just for our listeners, roughly what percentage of your personal residence is kind of made up in your net worth there?
Yeah, so our house, we bought our house for $440,000. We currently owe $370 on it, and it's California's appreciated a bit. It's probably worth about $540 now. It's gone up about $100,000. So yeah, roughly 200, little under 200,000. I guess 171K I got right there in equity in a personal home. So not much of it is personal residence.
Okay, cool, awesome. And just for our listeners' sake, as you've been kind of building this portfolio, have you been pretty intentional in getting to these kind of ratios? Did it always start this way with the rentals and with the equities, or how has it kind of all come to be where it is today?
Yeah, so I remember when I first started investing, I got out of college and I asked my parents, I was like, hey, I want to start investing. I've got a little bit of my investment. What do you suggest? And they said, well, I would just kind of go with a generic S&P low index fund. So I started doing that. That seemed kind of boring to just put it all on that. So I've done kind of a 75% S&P with a 25% kind of a growth just because we have a long time horizon. So a little bit more risky investment. And I pretty much, that formula has worked. So I pretty much just stuck with that. It's kind of boring, but S&P for about 75% of it, and then 25% with a little more of the aggressive side. And then we kind of became, the whole housing thing kind of became a beast on its own. We were getting ready to move out of our first house, and we really didn't have much equity into it. And my parents had one rental home, and I was like, hey, how's this rental stuff working out? And they're like, oh, it's been pretty good for us. You know, we make a little money on the rental. So we rented out that first home, and it went really well. Actually, that was almost 10 years ago, and we had the same renter in that home. She hasn't moved out. She doesn't want to buy another house. So she's been awesome. That's the only one I self-managed just because I have such an amazing tenant in there. I had one bad experience trying to self-manage my second rental. And after that, it's been all property managers and rentals after that. I started listening to reading a lot of Robert Kiyosaki, and he was big on obviously real estate and leveraging real estate, which is a little opposed to Ramsey, who wants to have all cash for real estate. So I kind of, took both those and tried to chew on both those and decide how we wanted to do it. We actually got our first house that we ever bought. We were able to pay that whole house off. We had no mortgage on it. It was $220. With all of our overseas money that we got when we were living in Japan, we were able to knock that house totally out. So I had no payment on that house, which helped my wife left the military because we had that rent coming in from that house and no payment. But after reading Kiyosaki's book, I was like, that money's just sitting in there making me, whatever, it's appreciating that, not really doing much. So I tapped into that, ended up taking a mortgage and pulled $170,000 out of that house after we had it paid off, and then used that $170,000 to invest in all these other rentals. Also mortgaged at about 80% initially when we bought them. Although I did buy my first 3 with cash, and I think that was helpful, just giving me a little bit of buffer. So I have three rentals that generate about $2,000 a month and a little over $2,000 in cash flow. So I have a basis of, if everything else goes wrong, I have these that I know they're going to cash flow. So I felt a little more comfortable taking the risk and getting mortgages on the next three rentals. So that was kind of how I justified, leveraging a little bit higher since I had a pretty solid base of a couple of paid for rentals that were already cash flowing pretty decently.
Okay, so I want to jump into those rentals, but first of all, how much do you have in the market across everything, across all the buckets? Did you say like 1.5?
Just in the market, if I take out, I have 1.6 liquid, and we only have 40K plus that 100 in the seats. Everything else is in the 50K, so probably about 1.4 or so in the market right now. Okay,
and last week, I'm just thinking out loud, and something I want to ask you. Last week we were recording this at the beginning of the March, so this was after there was a big dip in the market at the end of February. Right. So S&P, I'm just taking averages here. It's going to be general numbers, about 11% down for the week, right? 11, 12 or something. That's about 150,000 for you, probably, or a couple hundred.
We lost that. I remember our that equity account that I had most of the money on was up to 940, and as of before today, the market bounced back up a little today. It was down to 826. So that one lost about 110, and then with our other ones, we were probably close to 140, 150 that we lost. So in that last week. Did it affect behavior at all? Did you sell? Did you put more in? Did you adjustments made? I didn't have a bunch of capital laying around, but I did buy a little bit. Luckily, our time horizon is far enough off that one thing that really kind of helped cage that is we started investing shortly before 2008 or in 2008 when the market crashed. And so I remember our first time we only had like 100,000 maybe in the market, and it went down to 50,000. I was like, oh my gosh, we just lost $50,000. And, over the course of this thing, we just lost half our money. And it was kind of like, okay. Then I saw it all come back like right away. Well, not right away. In the next few years, the market's recovered and it all came back.
Right.
So now I just view these corrections as kind of like seeing into the future. Like we've never been at a point where the market hasn't recovered to where it once was. It may take some time, but basically I see these as time machines. Now I've traveled back in time to when the market was, wherever it is. I'll invest more. And it's going to come back to where it was. It never hasn't. So unless we look into some sort of apocalyptic time, the markets are going to come back to where they have. It just depends on your horizon. Now, if I was 3 years from retirement, I'd probably be a little more concerned. And I'm trying to decide how I'm going to start playing this out. If I'm going to go to more bonds, more conservative investments as we get closer to retirement. But really, I don't need any access to this money for the next 20 years. So I have such a long time horizon. I have the benefit of sitting there and I can stomach market fluctuations. But I was kind of curious. I was like, if it does dip, I knew we were kind of due for a little bit of a pullback. How am I going to feel? And it really didn't affect me very much personally. I was like, I'll buy a little more so it's on discount, and just kind of viewed it as a free time machine moving back in time. And I know the market went back to where it was at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and it's interesting to think about and play with once the numbers get a little bit bigger, right? Yeah. Because we just released Jason, a couple of weeks ago, this guy from this engineer who net worth of 7 or 8 or something, and he was primarily invested in the equity markets, and so at 10%, he lost close to $700,000.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. It's all ratios at some point, right? So you're just like, well, it's 10%, but when you're talking about different networks, it really becomes like a huge sum. But I guess it's all relative to where you're at, right?
Yeah, and he'd probably say the same thing as you, right? He'd probably say, I mean, whatever. If it comes back in 3 years, it'll come back in 3 years, right? I mean, I remember asking like, hey, aren't you afraid there's going to be a correction, and don't you just want to pull some out of it just in case? But same answer as you. Even though he's a little bit older, it's hey, I'm just gonna ride it, right? Let's just see what happens.
If you can afford to ride it, and that's funny because I'm really not much of a gambler. Like when I go to Vegas and I put $20 on a blackjack table, I'm like, oh man, I don't want to lose this money, but I'm willing to lose 150 grand in a week in the market just because I right. So it's just perspective, I guess.
So I know you hit on real estate here, but maybe just before we dive into like specific deal details, maybe high level tell us. I know you said cash flow of about 2,000. I assume that's the sum, right, of the ones that cash flow, but maybe just high level, what did you buy the house for if it has a mortgage, and how much it cash flows a month if it does? Yeah,
sure. I have all those numbers here. So on my so our first ever rental we bought was our primary residence that we first bought. That one currently, let's see when's cash flow. It rents for $1,350, and my mortgage on that is like $1,315. So that one's pretty much a net zero cash flow, but it's got $135,000 or $172,000 mortgage balance on it. Our next house we bought for $240. We currently owe $195 on it. It rents for $1,650 a month. And the mortgage after management fees, that one's pretty much a wash on the mortgage as well. So those are really just appreciation plays. I'm not getting too much as far as cash flow off of those. So that's why I was like, I need to find something other than just buying these bigger, single family homes that we've been living in if I want to make money. So then I went to these turnkey investment properties, and these next 3 that I bought were all obviously much cheaper. So they were $58,000, $61,000, and $71,000 was the price. So I saved up, paid cash for each of those. Those rent for $700, $705, and $760. So those are ones that are just about $2,000 a month in cash flow on that. Then I bought
combined.
Combined 2,000 there. I bought some more, little more expensive properties. Those were purchased for $164 and $184. They rent for $1,200 and $1,350. And the mortgage is just about that. And I net a couple $100 on those a month as well. So there's a little more appreciation than cash flow properties. So all told, cash flow per month on all the properties is close to probably around $3,000, with mortgage payments on all of them about $5,500. So about $8,500 in rent, $5,500 in mortgage payments a month on the
so about $3,000 cash flow, and the first 2 and then the last 2 I assume are in your location or somewhat close to you, and the 3 turnkeys are not.
Yeah, all the turnkeys I have are Memphis, Little Rock, Oklahoma City, and Little Rock. So all those are spread throughout the Midwest where the rental numbers work a little better. And then our 3 primary residences that we've lived in were Spokane, Washington, and Enid, Oklahoma. So the only house we have that's local is the one we live in. I don't have any local rentals. Everything's done through property managers.
Spokane, man, that's my hometown.
Oh yeah, nice. Yeah, we love Spokane. That place is awesome. Like if we could move back there, I would. It was really cool. I was in the snow. Like we got 2 feet of snow one day, and I'm from California, and I was like, "What is this?" And I'd never plowed snow, shoveled the driveway before, so it was an introduction to snow and winter. But Bloomsday and the downtown area, and the Hoop Fest and all the stuff they have there, we loved it. So it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
So, Phillip, I want to push you on I'm just going to press you a little bit because I think it's interesting. It's something that we haven't really talked about, even though we've had a bunch of real estate investors on the show. So you have about, 3 of the rentals that really just cover the mortgage and don't cash flow, right? Is the thought there to play the appreciation game or to just, pay? I don't know if you have it on a 15-year or a 30-year, because in one sense you could have a unique strategy where you just pay it off with a 15-year and then either sell the house or then it cash flows.
Yeah, so I've kind of been debating now of how much I want to start dumping these houses and make them cash flow, or if I want to just kind of hold them long term and play the appreciation. I've got enough cash flow coming off, and we're making enough money now to live comfortably. Like I don't know what I would do with a whole bunch of extra income other than just continue to invest it. So I'm kind of just leaving them leveraged and using the depreciation. Like I basically pay. I'm getting ready to do my taxes this year, but I'll basically pay. And this was Kiyosaki's point. I'll basically pay no tax on all this income, because I can depreciate almost all of it away in the thing. So if I start paying them off, my tax bill goes up and I lose some of the tax benefits from that. So I'm kind of weighing that against the, how much debt do I really want to hold right now? I feel like it's a pretty comfortable level. But I could, it's kind of a toy, kind of a yin and yang of deciding whether I want to keep paying these balances down and have cash flow a little much. Right now, it's not going to do me any good. So yeah, the thought is for these ones that aren't really cash flowing, they are going to increase some with rent. The one company increased $50 each of those rentals a year. So that'll increase over the next few years. So as they go on, they will start to cash flow a little better. But yeah, for now, I'm just going to hold them and let them appreciate and play the appreciation game on those that are pretty neutral on the cash flows.
And what do you have mortgage wise? 15 or 30 years?
30 years on everything right now. When we first bought our first house, I was like, we're going to pay this thing off quick. We're going to get a 15-year loan. And it was 5.875% at that time to get a 15-year, which I thought was an awesome rate. It was like, we're under 6% now. All the homes that we bought for personal residences that we rent out are at 3.25%. And then all my rentals are between 5.875 and 6.125. So all right around the 6% rate for most of those.
So do you think about refinancing now that we're at an all-year low on the treasury rate here?
Yeah, I've kind of looked into that. I was like, hey, do I want to refinance? I don't know if I could refinance the rentals for too much less, since you don't get a great rate on those since they're second homes. I might be able to refinance those a little bit. But my personal residence, I contacted someone a couple weeks ago and said, hey, what are the current refinance rates? Because we have a fair amount of equity now with the appreciation. I could pull some out of our personal residence and possibly use some of that, but I could get it down to 3% maybe, or maybe a little under. If there was something down in 2.5% range, that might be tempting. But right now, not like jumping on that to refinance, at least in our personal residence.
So who did you use for the turnkey properties? Just curious if somebody listening wants to do the same, and did you have a good experience with them? Yeah,
I'd be happy to give those out. I went with Mid-South home buyers. They've been really easy to work with. They were awesome. So the only reason I didn't continue to buy houses with them is their supply just ran out. So I would buy a house about every 8 months, starting 2 or 3 years ago, and then you'd have to wait another 8 or 9 months before you could even be in the pool to buy another house, because they had like a list. So then I started, after I bought a couple from them, I reached out to Memphis Invest, which I think they just changed their name to the REI Invest, like real estate investment. But Memphis Invest was their old name, and that's the company I bought the other two for. After I took a loan out on that house that we had paid off, I used the proceeds from that to buy those other two plus that syndicate that I had. So Memphis Invest, their homes are those are the ones that are a little more expensive, and they don't cash flow as well. They're a little more of appreciation. You don't get a side of cash flow because those houses are $165,000 and $185,000 houses. But they were both those companies I highly recommend. They were very easy to work with. Memphis Invest will still call me like weekly and be like, "Do we have any questions?" I'm like, "No, as long as the check's coming in, I don't have any questions." But they're super customer friendly. They'll reach out to you all the time, almost to the point where it's too much. So I had really good experiences working with those. And the turnkey has been good. I could go out and do all the contracting and flip a house and try and do that stuff. But with 4 kids and both of us working, it's worth my money to pay for a turnkey that's going to go out and do all the work. And then they also property manage them as well. So there's one-stop shop for doing the flips, buying the house, and then being my property manager. I don't have to work with 4 different people. I work with one person, and it's super simplified.
Okay. And then what about financing? Do they help you set that up as well?
Yeah, they have preferred lenders. So they'll be like, hey, this is, we have 3 lenders that we really work with. And that can be a little tricky because lenders don't want to give out a loan on a $70,000 house. It's not really worth their time. So they have enough, they have lenders they work with that they give them enough volume that they're willing to work with you and get a loan on a pretty inexpensive house where you get. So right now, that one house I just bought it was $80,000. I got a loan for $64,000. It's the equity or the rent, the mortgage payment's like $450 on it or something, throwing everything. So
Wait, you said it's an $80,000 house and you got a $64,000 mortgage.
Yeah. So the loan is
wow.
$64K. Yeah.
So you only put down what, like $20,000 after closing costs?
20,000 was my closing. Yeah. I had 16K in equity. It was 20,000 to close on it. So really inexpensive to get into the house. It's not like you need $100,000 to go out and invest with at least with Mid-South. You can get in for a super low price.
And what is that? A 2-bed, 1-bath?
That one, most of them are like 3-1 or 3-2s.
3-1, 3-2. Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of their standard go-to.
Wow, so that's pretty amazing. Someone can get into that for $20,000 in cash flows. What'd you say, $450 a month, $400 a month?
Yeah, that one cash flows about $400 a month. That's not including. I'll still have to pay. No, that one has that's got a mortgage on it, so that includes insurance and property tax and all that. So yeah, that cash flows about $400 a month. There may be some. I've had pretty good luck with maintenance on this. I've had to replace a door here or there. Some pretty minor maintenance, couple $100 here or there. I haven't had huge maintenance cost with them. So yeah, cash flowing about $400 a month for a $1,600 investment's pretty good.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question is maintenance, and then other question would be tenants. How often is there turnover, and have you had any bad tenants?
All the tenants I've had through the turnkey rentals, they'll tell me, hey, we got, Mr. X in here and he's a bus driver in Memphis and this is his income. We verified it. It's 3-to-1 to his rent ratio. Looks good. So I don't really even know the tenants. The property company takes care of all that. I have had a turnover. They do charge like a releasing fee and like a turnover fee when the tenant comes up. They usually sign, about 1 to 2 to 3 year leases. And so there's a little bit of cost when they flip it, but the Mid-South ones, at least, they guarantee they'll get a renter in within 90 days or they'll start covering your mortgage. So they're pretty good about getting people right in there. So that one's kind of like a risk-free one. It's not going to sit empty for more than 90 days. And then the Mid-South ones the Memphis Invest ones are pretty much the same where they haven't had any issues. The checks have come in. That one, every single check came in last year and I didn't have a single maintenance cost for the whole year for both those houses. So the companies are pretty good. They want to have repeat renters and buyers, so that I think they have a vested interest in making sure that there's not huge maintenance costs. If they can screen the tenants and get good tenants in there, it's a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, Phillip, you got a tremendous story, built a tremendous net worth. Where do you kind of go from here? Do you have a passive income goal, net worth goal you're trying to hit? Where do you head?
So yeah, that's kind of a fun game to play. And I was a weather major in college, which sounds kind of fun. It's like clouds and stuff. That's cool. And being a pilot, I thought that would be fun, but I quickly found out that weather is mostly physics and our upper level classes where I was like, I'm a physics major. I'm not a weather major. You got to learn about lifting forces and mechanisms and how all these computer models work together. So I became kind of an Excel, not wizard, but I learned how to use Excel more because we're doing a lot of math and stuff. So early on, I was like, man, let's see if I extrapolate this out. I learned how to basically make extrapolations on the income. So if I have, this much income right now and I can earn 10% growth rate, if I start mapping that out, what's it going to turn into? And so I don't really have like an end term goal, but if I just look at like a 10%, market growth rate and I invest like a quarter of our income into it, I can like project out, approximately where our net worth is going to be. So that's fun. So if I look at when I'm like 55, it's about $11 million. When I get to 65, it's close to $30 million. And then 85-ish, getting towards the end of my time. Hopefully I live longer than that, but I was born in 1980. So 2065, it's over $205 million. So it's kind of fun to play that out. And so I was like, well, it'd be cool to have $100 million at some point in life. That'd be kind of cool to say. Obviously the value dollar is going to go down. It's not going to be worth what it is today. But I'm just going to keep chugging along for now. Hopefully be extremely generous with it at some point, pay for the kids to go to school. And I've heard other people talk on the podcast, but, how much do you leave your kids? Enough to do something that they want to do, but not enough to do nothing that they don't have to do anything. So it's kind of a balance of how much do we want to leave to our kids. I also see it as like a big responsibility too. Like I'm hopefully going to have this, fairly high net worth, and it's a huge responsibility. Like how are you going to use that money to change the world? Just having a bunch of money to have money doesn't really do anything for anyone else. So how am I effectively going to use that, later on as I get older to hopefully affect, positive change somewhere along the way. So I kind of view it as a big responsibility as well. It'll be cool to have, we've traveled a lot, and, I don't like have a huge emphasis on toys and values. I did buy a Porsche at one point, and that was really fun to drive around on the track. But I found like going to work and driving, I have a pretty long commute, 80 miles. It just wasn't that cool to drive it on the freeway, not really turning. I was like, well, I'm going to sell this. And we got something that was a hybrid where I get better gas mileage. It's more fun to me to watch the gas mileage. Like, I only use 0.69 gallons of gas to get to work today. Like, that's more fun than driving my Porsche to work. So sold that, bought more economical cars. So I don't have like a huge taste for like super fancy things. Although we do like I said, we like to travel and stuff. So I don't know, just keep growing it to the best of my ability, and then hopefully be able to give it to a worthy cause that I think is going to be impactful down the road.
Yeah, that's cool. So just for our listeners, can you walk through the math of hitting those targets that you kind of explained, and what that looks like, and what kind of rate of return, and how you kind of get to that point?
Yeah, absolutely. So I plug in what I currently have. So right now we finished 2021 with about 2.5. So I plug that in. I say, hey, a growth rate of 10%. And of course, that's a net worth increase. So not all my investments are going to grow at 10%, but most of it is invested at this point. Like, I don't have much that's not. So with my house stuff, if you look at internal rates of returns, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but that basically factors in depreciation, appreciation, and equity growth in your rentals. And those usually average 15 to 20%. So a 10% greater growth rate is, I think, not some people, like have a 6 or 7. You could play with the number there, but I assume 10%. And then a take home salary, right now our take home is, depending on where we're at, between 200 and 300K on a take home. So if I invest a quarter of that, I plug that in each month as an investment amount. So I'm growing our net worth by a quarter of our take home, and then the rest is just compound interest at 10%. And if you just do that and keep adding up each year, hey, add 10% plus dump a little bit in it, but in for that we add next year, add 10%, dump a little more in, add 10%, dump a little more in. And you just extrapolate it out just using Excel. You just drop it down and it does all the math for you. And yeah, it starts getting into some pretty crazy numbers.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And we have tons of listeners that write in trying to figure out how the math works. And it's remarkable to play with it a little bit, and then to really see how much of it comes from compounded interest versus actually your own contributions, right?
Yeah, and that's crazy. And it's like that whole one thing. We did take a finance class in school, and you guys have probably seen like the Ben and Arthur thing. The guy that starts investing at 25 and then stops at 35, and the other guy starts investing from 35 all the way to 65, and the dude that started earlier ends up with more than the guy that started later, even though he invested like 3 times more.
Yep, totally.
So that was a good kind of eye opener. I remember seeing that, and I was like, man, investing early is important, and it really is. I mean, if you want to change your trajectory on where you're at, if you dump a bunch in early and use that power of compound interest. I remember a basketball coach growing up told me, he's like, compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. Like, yeah, these little words of wisdom, and that kind of always stuck with me too, being like, oh yeah, compound interest must be important. And then you start running the numbers and looking at it, and it's like, yeah, that makes a big difference. Like, my money's going to make way more than I'm ever going to possibly earn, just working a W-2 job in my life.
Yeah. So Phillip, I'm kind of curious. You bring up giving and you bring up getting this big net worth, and you have children and stuff. I'm just curious, do you have a will and do you have a trust, and how do you kind of look at, do you talk to your kids about this? Do you plan on it? What's kind of the take there?
That's been kind of tricky. They're starting to get to the point now where I'm like, hey, when we leave this house in a few years, we're going to move to LA, and we've kind of been looking at houses, and they'll see the house and like, Dad, that is a house of luxury that you want to buy. That house looks awesome, because we have these like houses that we look at on the coast or whatever. And our next house will probably be, we want to live close to the airport in LA, because we're hopefully be flying out of there with our future careers. And LA homes on the coast are between $2 and $4 million. So looking at buying one of those, down the road at some point. And so the kids kind of have an idea that like, hey, mom and dad have some money, that they want to buy these super awesome houses, but they don't have context of what $1 million is yet. So at some point we're kind of trying to balance, how much do we really want to tell them that they have, because we don't want them to have a sense of entitlement, which I don't think they will. They're all pretty good kids, but also balance that with giving them enough to make sure they can go to school or do what they need to do without giving them the sense that they don't have to do anything. As far as like trust and will, we do have wills right now. I need to start I've talked with my wife about that, and we probably need to start doing some estate and trust planning to decide how this all gets shaken out, were the worst to happen. So that's kind of my next to-do list is start setting up some estate and trust planning. to make sure this all goes, where we want it to go. If heaven forbid something happens to us, and now the courts or our family has to try to decide how to deal with this money. And that's kind of a delicate thing too. My parents know that we have a fair amount of money. My in-laws don't know. I mean, they know that we're well off and we're doing well. They don't know that we have a multi-million-dollar net worth. Neither do any of my friends. So it's kind of hard to bring up. Like, how do you tell your friends, oh, hey, do you have an estate planning guy? I got $2.5 million in net worth. Can you help me out? Like, how am I really have my friends know that we have money, but they don't know we have that much. Like, how are your friends going to look at you if they find out you have $2.5 million? In the military, everyone knows what everyone makes. There's no disguise on what the income is. So everyone knows what you make every year. It's published, online. You just go and look up what your rank is and what you make. But so that's kind of a delicate subject. There's another guy in our unit who has a wife who's a professional that makes a couple $100,000 a year. So I'll confide with him on like, what are you thinking about this or this, but not like actual net worth numbers. Cause it's kind of weird to think how your friend, are they going to expect you to buy every time you go out? Are they going to expect you to foot the bill for this? Or are they just going to look at you differently? So that's been something I've kind of been struggling with. I want to help and advise like my buddies and be like, hey, you need to invest. Here's what you should do. And some of them have like latched onto it and been like, awesome. Like I actually just got one of my buddies, he just bought a Mid-South home and they have a little referral kickback. I get like $1,000. So I just texted him today. I was like, hey, I got my $1,000. Thanks for buying a Mid-South home. They stopped their referral program. Unfortunately, they were getting too tight on trying to buy their flips. So they stopped their referral program. But trying to talk with friends about it is kind of a difficult thing. So you're kind of on an island in that sense. So yeah, having some, a lawyer, someone I can go to and start setting up that stuff that can give me advice. Cause at this point, it's kind of hard to be like, oh, what's the hot stock? What do you want to buy? And just kind of have water cooler talk. It's the point now where it's a little more serious. So, that's been kind of a challenge. Yeah. Not really being able to disclose it with anyone around us.
Yeah. It's actually really interesting, Phil, because that's something that we hear from a lot of millionaires, right? Is that who to tell, when to tell, how much to tell. I think it's a common concern. So I just want to flip back here. We've talked a lot about your investments, right? Market and real estate, but kind of shifting to your life here a little bit. 4 kids, both you and your wife working, right? How have you managed that? What advice to somebody who maybe both spouses are working? What's kind of worked and what hasn't worked for you?
Yeah, that was a real big concern when my wife, wanted to go back to work. Obviously, she felt like their stay-at-home mom is like, I think one of the hardest jobs in the world because I'll be stay-at-home dad a lot now because she's on the road, 10 to 12 days out of the month. So I'm stay-at-home dad. A lot of days where I come home from work and I'm getting the kids' homework done and get them fed, get everything ready, get them up in the morning, get lunches made, get them off to school. The only way that we've been able to really make it work is we have her mother lives about 10 miles away. So she moved closer to us. Her father passed away about 4 years ago. So she moved closer to be with us. So that's helpful. But she's 70. She's a little older. So it's not like she can take the kids, full time and do full time nanny. So we reached out to like nanny.com. And when we decided she was going back to work, I'm like, we can't just have your mom do everything. That's too much. So we have a nanny that we found that she's been awesome. She's been with us for a couple of years and she picks up the kids from school on the days that we're both working. She takes them to their after school activities, drops them off. So they have soccer season and they do taekwondo and they pretty much play sports year round. So the seasons when the sports are going, it can be crazy. For this last fall, we had soccer, and because of their ages, they were all on 4 different soccer teams. So that meant 4 different practices, 4 different games on Saturdays. So it's a lot of shuffle. My wife's really organized. She mastered Google Calendar. So it'll be like, hey, kid 1 has to get picked up from school here. Kid 2 has to get dropped off here. So there's a little bit of logistics sometimes with how they're going to get to all their activities. But we have a nanny that helps, like I said, pick them up from school. And then my job in the Air Force has been awesome. I can be home pretty much every night at around 5 o'clock. We really don't have too many crazy late nights or late flights with the flying that I do. So on the occasion that I do have to fly late or no one can be here overnight, Grandma will come in and take over and do that. We actually make it work this last week. We just took a trip to Fiji for a week, and it was the first time we were away from the kids. So we had nanny did pick up from school and after school activities. Grandma came over, fed him bed, stayed with him for the night, took him to school in the morning, and then nanny picked him up after school. So that was the first time that we were away from the kids, but it was awesome. We went to this. My wife bid on this trip at an auction to go to Fiji, and I was like, I guess we're going to Fiji. So we ended up being there for doing a 5-day trip to Fiji. But this place was unbelievable. It was all 5-course food. You had your own private villa. We took my sister and cousin because they were there at the incident when my wife bid on it. So we invited them to come along, and they helped chip in for some of it. But it was all the foods included. You had a 12-person wait staff. It was on the beach. You took snorkeling trips, day trips, went around the village. It was out of control. It was beautiful. So that was one of those things, kind of like, hey, we worked really hard the last couple of years. We actually finally spoiled ourselves on a bit of an awesome vacation. And it was really cool. But because we had that support at home, we had the nanny, we had grandma, close. So we were able to make it work. So right now it's working, pretty well so far, just having that kind of support system. But we wouldn't be able to do it without having some really good help. So, I mean, 2 working professionals, you need to have either a family or a really reliable nanny to make it happen.
Awesome. So I want to just end here with some rapid fire questions before we get into just mistakes and advice. So
yeah,
what's the most expensive car you've ever purchased?
Our newest minivan was, I think, $48,000. Like I said, it came with almost $12,000 or $13,000 in federal rebates, or rebate, the state, federal, all the rebates that kicked in. I think we got a pretty good deal after all of that stuff. But yeah, about $50,000 on it. It's a hybrid. You can get 30 miles electric charge. It's got screens. So we spent a lot of time in the car with the kids driving around. So we figured spend some money on the car. So yeah, our minivan is our most expensive car.
Okay. What items or experiences are worth spending more money on? What's worth the splurge?
Yeah, like I said, we love to travel. So we've done, we took the kids actually when our daughters were about 1 year old, one and a little bit older. We went to China with them. So we've traveled with them, did a week in China. We went to New Zealand, traveled around there for a week. So we've gotten to see, so we really value travel. We go skiing every spring break, and then we're always on the road, whether it's local trips or other stuff, traveling. So I value the travel. That's a pretty common answer. A lot of people say that experiencing travel is worth it. And in my case, that's been it. And then just relationships with people, doing stuff that bonds with other people, because in the end, money's just a tool to experience life. So if you're not using it to, enhance relationships, see family, stuff like that, it's just kind of immaterial.
Sure. What's not worth the money to you?
I try and be invest in pretty much everything I do. So if I can get a deal on something, I try and get a deal. It's funny, even being a multimillionaire, when I go to the supermarket, if I buy an off brand and can save you see the per unit ounce price or whatever, I always check those. So trying to get good value on basically anything, but specifically not worth the money. Like I said, I had a Porsche for a while and that was awesome and fun to drive, but I ended up selling it just because it didn't really hold up value. So, we don't buy a lot of new stuff, although it seems like we get an Amazon box every day from my wife, either buying, basically because you can put your whole life on Amazon now. So I don't think we really shop anymore. Everything comes from Amazon. But just being able to have value in what you have and try not to overpay for stuff that's just, material possessions.
Yeah. How old were you when you became a millionaire? Do you remember?
Yeah, I didn't start tracking this until I got a little bit older. And I know you guys asked that, so I was trying to think. And I think we were probably in our young 30s. This has really kind of, grown as she's gone back to work and we've had a little more disposable income to dump in. But on June of 2016 is when I started tracking, and we had 1.2. So probably sometime around 2016, 2015 is when we first became millionaires. So about 5 years ago.
So that's pretty amazing, right? So 2016, you're 1.2, 2020 now, just the start of 2020, March of 2020 here, you're at 2.4. So it only took you, 4.5 years to get that second million.
Yeah, it's crazy. And that a lot has to do with how much we've been invested in equities, and the market's been hot since that time it's gone up. So yeah, as I was telling my wife, I was like, hey, we just hit over $1 million. She's like, what? And I'm like, now we're at 1.4, now 1.6, now we're 1.8. So I'll kind of she'll be like, what? How's it going up so fast? And I'm like, that's in the market, man. I don't know what else to tell you.
Right. Have you ever used a financial advisor?
I'm not. I read, Tony Robbins has a really good book, Unshakable, and he kind of talks about the cost of financial advisors and paying that 1% fee. When you, and it really bears out when you run those numbers. If I do an 8% or 9% return versus a 10% return and extrapolate it out over 40 years, I end up losing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably millions if I run the whole numbers out. I pay in that 1%. I have to look at the difference, but his whole analogy is that, hey, these guys, if they're charging 1% for, asset allocation and fees, most of them probably can't beat the market. There's guys that do every year, but they don't probably do it consistently. They don't put any risk in there. They don't have any skin in the game. They're just taking your 1%. So you're going to pay 40 to 50% potentially of your net worth to someone who doesn't have any skin in the game. So when you run those numbers out, I kind of said, hey, we'll just stick with low cost index investing. I'm gonna own the market. I have 500 different stocks. If I own an S&P 500, I'm well diversified. I could get maybe a little trickier with some of them and try and do better. But my kind of philosophy is no one really beats the market consistently, so why not just own the market?
Sure. Okay. How much do you spend a year, household spending?
We probably spend about $8,000 to $9,000 a month if you include our mortgage and everything else we pay for, kids' activities, cars, everything else. So we're probably around 80 to 90K spending a year on a annual income that's probably close to 300.
And what was the range? What was it when you first started?
When we first started, I was going to look this up, but I think as brand new second lieutenants, I think we both made about $50,000 to $60,000 each. So we started out at a six-figure income just starting out. So we're probably close to 60 or 120 combined pretty quickly. And a lot of that being in the military, a lot of that is tax-free, especially when you deploy. We deployed a bunch when we were younger. So you're not paying tax on a lot of that money. So it's even bigger starting out. So that was a huge thing. Having no student loans and a pretty good net worth to start.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. No debt at all, really, right? I mean, you got some mortgage on your houses and stuff, but no student loans is the big one.
Yeah, no student loans. We haven't, other than mortgage debt. And then I did, we didn't have any equity. I just bought the other house. So we have a loan on that new van that we bought. It's like $600 a month for that. But other than that, no other debt.
So Phillip, just big picture here. I'm going to vaguely say your age, young 40s-ish, right?
39. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. There you go. What is happiness for you? What does it mean to be happy, to be fulfilled, right? Obviously, you said the money is just a tool to build relationships and to experience things. But throughout this whole journey, I mean, you guys have obviously been extremely successful, young age. You've both been successful in your career. It sounds like a great family.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be happy or fulfilled? What's this all about for you?
Like I said, I mean, family is like we chose to have a pretty big family, and that was important for us. Like I said, relationships, but more than anything, just be able to experience life. Like you get one life, right? Might as well maximize it. And if this is a tool to let you maximize and hopefully do something, pretty cool down the road, since you have the flexibility of maybe not working as much. We both, want to be airline pilots, continue on down the road. But part of the beauty of that is you can kind of dictate your schedule. Since we have this net worth, we don't have to, work a full pilot schedule. You can scale back, give away trips and work part-time. And it just gives you more chance to, like I said, get out and experience life. I love sports. I love going to sporting events. Obviously, I bought the tickets, but we've been to, a bunch of great sporting events. So just getting out there and doing what you love and then sharing it with the people around you. Like, it's like asking the secrets of life or what do you have? It was kind of interesting on that vein when we went to this Fiji trip, and it was basically everything was taken care of for you. Like your driver was there, your food was there. We didn't think about anything. And we sat there for 5 days and not having to do anything and have everything provided for you. And I was like, I don't know if I could do this forever. Like the first 3 days, it was unbelievably awesome. After like 3 or 4 days, I'm like, I need to be like doing something. Like you can't just sit around and just have food brought to you and have these amazing, experiences. Like that inner desire to work and achieve and do something is like, was realized, I guess, on that trip, because I'm like, our bodies are made to be productive and do work. Like just sitting around doing nothing isn't anything. So continuing to build whatever it is that I'm into or we're into down the road, whether it's a foundation or it enhance, school or whatever it is, just having that flexibility to continue to build. I think that we were made to work and do stuff because that seems to be like how people are most happy. Just continue on that vein.
Phillip, I'm just kind of curious, as you've gone on this financial journey, you've talked about traveling and these vacations, you bring up this trip in Fiji. How much do you typically spend on vacations, or maybe even the one that you just recently went on to Fiji?
Yeah, that trip, that house, that was a $20,000 for that week. We split it between 4 people. So we both paid $10,000, or our family, me and my wife paid $10,000 for that trip, and my sister and cousin each paid $5,000. So that was a $10,000 trip. That's probably about the most we've ever spent on like a vacation. I think our trip to China was about $10,000, and then it was a little less than that when we went to New Zealand. So we do that. We usually do one big trip, and then we go skiing. We go skiing every year, which is an expensive sport. But getting the kids in ski lessons, I think they're charging like $200 a day per kid. So when we had 4 kids lessons, it was like $800 a day to teach them how to ski. So they learned to ski pretty quick, because I was like, we're not paying $800 a day just for you guys to learn to ski. So they figured out by the time they were 5 and 6, I'm like, you're skiing with us, man. So we'll pay some pretty big money for some of these trips, but usually we drive. Although it is nice with my wife being an airline pilot, we can fly standby for free. So the kids have been to Hawaii 3 times last year because we can just hop on a flight and head out to Hawaii if there's empty seats. So my wife had to fly Christmas Eve And I was like, hey, there's empty seats on your flights. What if we just came with you on Christmas night and flew to Hawaii with you? And she's like, you guys would do that? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So we hopped on, barely squeaked on the flight, and spent 2 nights in Hawaii pretty much for free because we could fly standby. It is dicey because there have to be empty seats. So you show at the airport, hoping the seats hold out. But we've been able to travel like that too, pretty inexpensively by being able to hop on flights.
Yeah, it's kind of like a travel hacking for pilots. That's awesome. So, Phillip, just to kind of wrap up, what mistakes have you made, and couple that with maybe the advice that you would give to somebody who's just starting out?
Yeah, I mean, mistakes that we've made. We bought cars before we went to Japan, then I had to sell them. So yeah, just the value in cars dropped so fast. I quickly learned that buying newer cars is just not super smart. So, or if you buy a new one, my Nissan Altima I drive right now, I bought new because we had just moved back in the States and I needed a car and I didn't want to hassle with used car stuff. So I just bought a new one. It was easy. But car values don't really hold up. So don't pay for a new car unless, it's your dream car and you saved up and you can probably pay cash for it. Other than that, lesson, obviously I've harped on it early, but just investing early when you're young, I can like a living proof of the idea of compound interest of like, hey, just dump a bunch of money in when you're young. If you can do it. I mean, don't, when you're just out of college, you want to spend money doing, you finally have freedom and some money, but, live your life and spend money. But at the same time, if you can just set up a regimented thing where money is automatically going into your investments and you don't think about it, you don't ever see it. That's kind of how I set all our stuff up, was just automatically take the money at the beginning of the month. It goes into the investment. I never feel like I have to spend it. I don't feel like I'm losing it because it was never there. So early automatic investing, into a low cost mutual fund sounds kind of simple, but it works.
That's awesome. Once again, that's Phillip with a net worth of $2.4 million. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks guys a bunch. Keep up the great work. I really enjoyed the podcast and thanks for having me.
Thanks, Phillip.
Thanks for listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast with Clark Sheffield and Chase Mattinson. For more stories, investment opportunities, and information, check out our website at millionairesunveiled.com. See you next time when you'll hear from another everyday millionaire.